Rebeccca.
Okay, persistence.
Awesome. What about you, Thu?
Tenacity.
David?
Never giving up.
Philip?
Oh man, you guys have hit them all. I'm gonna go with my wife on persistence. You've got to have thick skin.
Awesome. All right, so now I'm gonna have directed question for each one of our panelists. And again, I will start with Rebeccca. What are the pros and cons of being family entrepreneur?
A family entrepreneur.
Yes.
Okay, so there's lots of pros. The pros, you know, Phil and I worked together about over 20 years. We started the business from nothing to selling it with, you know, over 200 people. And, you know, we did a pretty good job, but it was 20 years of working together, starting in 1995 with 2 little kids and just, you know, jumping off on this business. Now, the pros I would say were, you know, you're working with your family member. In this case, it was my spouse. So you know each other, you know how each other work. There's a high level of trust that maybe you wouldn't have with, you know, just somebody you just met up with. So a lot of trust, you know how to work together. Ideally, if you're fortunate, you have complementary skill sets. In our case, we did. Phil, you know, we're both engineers, but he's a hardcore real engineer. I mean, he has patents and he's very detail oriented. He's very engineering oriented, where I'm more on the system side, the process side, the customer side, the employee side. So I would say that, you know, having a good combination of skills. And you have shared successes, so it's a lot of fun. But with that comes also, it's not always fun. And sometimes it can be a little difficult. And during good times, you're together 24 hours a day, and you have to learn to separate those things. And you also have to really find your line in the sand. Who's going to do what? So you're not stepping over each other. And we learned a lot of those lessons the hard way. But I think overall the pros outweigh the cons.
Awesome. So it comes down to trust and having complementary skills. Thank you for your insight, Rebeccca. So I have this question for Thu. What are the advantages and disadvantages of being an entrepreneur in the Midwest UP of Michigan?
I would say the disadvantages of the UP is lack of access to highly skilled professionals, transaction lawyers, patent lawyers, and the advantage are in the Midwest is highly skilled professionals.
Awesome.
Yeah, we had some, you know, lack of access to venture capital that really exists in the Midwest, but doesn't exist in the UP or not at a very high level. Makes it difficult.
Yeah, for sure. So David, this question is for you. And what is the differences between the mindset of an entrepreneur versus a non-entrepreneur?
I believe it's the drive to be successful on your own, even though we all know that you don't do it on your own. But I think when people start off as in a business or with the entrepreneurial spirit, it's a desire to accomplish something that maybe not so much about credit, but the willingness to take the risk and also suffer the rewards or the lack of reward. But it's got to do with that desire to be on your own.
Absolutely. It's the desire to be successful, take action, and leave an impact. I have this question for Phil. How do you and your spouse coordinate, share, or split the requirements and skill sets of running a business?
Well, so it's been a few years since we've worked together now, because we sold that company about 8 years ago, and I've gone on and was foolish enough to start another one. But when we worked together, as Rebeccca said, we had to know, you had to know where the line was. You had to stay in your own swim lane. I would say probably the biggest fights we got into were when Rebeccca got into my swim lane, because I never got into hers. But yeah, never. That's probably the biggest thing is you have to know which side of the business you're on and focus on that. We figured it out, and obviously it worked out for us, but it wasn't all pretty. We had some pretty good knockdown dragouts over the years.
Absolutely, yeah, not the swimming lane. But I'm here gonna ask Drew to mute himself. I don't know if we can do that as a host, Lisa. So I have another question for Rebeccca. What are the biggest challenges to becoming a successful entrepreneur?
I think you have your main challenges. You need a solid business case. You need cash flow. You need to understand, exactly what you're offering and what you're doing, and you need to have a pretty good plan. But I think another challenge is really learning how to maintain balance in your life, in your family and your health, and because you're never done. When you own your own business, it's always there. There's always something to do. There's always someone at your door, your office door. So you need to have some sort of discipline to manage your life. I think some of the challenges are just building a really good team that works together really well, that you can trust, establishing a culture where everyone's empowered, everybody's involved, and keeping that morale and that culture and that cadence moving forward. I think that's a huge challenge. I think picking the right customers is a challenge, especially in the beginning, understanding who you're working with so you're successful. But I think that's about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Having a good team and correct culture, because when you start a company, become an entrepreneur, you start going from 9 to 5 to 24/7. So having that balance is very, very important.
Yeah.
I have this question for Thu. How do you leverage the resources in your own network and community to develop an innovation?
Well, I would say,
Yeah, when we worked on the skincare, on starting who we called.
well, what we did for the skincare is for Thu Brule skincare, we research, find the right people, step by step, and find good people to help you out and listen to.
Yeah, we reached out to some of the people that we know that are advisors that we have, long-term financial advisors, make connections. We did a little research on the internet. We discovered where we could go to get manufacturing for the product, et cetera. So it was a step-by-step process, but it was all about working with where we knew people. We worked with the people that Thu and I used to sell the last business. The investment bankers reached out to them for feedback on who people they knew, and in the long run, we found all the people we needed to get the product started.
Absolutely. Tapping to the right network could accelerate the process and make it a lot easier. So I have another question for you, David. Under what circumstances do entrepreneurs thrive?
I think they thrive under, first of all, the desire to be independent. They thrive under pressure. They have to be willing to react to all kinds of changes in direction. They also have to be very focused, and you do have to be willing to work an extensive amount of hours. There's no such thing as 9 to 5.
Yep, absolutely. So I have this question for Phil. It's, how did your academic education prepare you to be a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I think, I'll answer both questions. The Michigan Tech obviously is a great engineering school, so I think I was well prepared to be an electrical engineer. I think it goes beyond that. As silly as it sounds, I grew up working on multiple farms and having to work by myself, essentially figuring out how to, whether it's putting up a fence line or fixing a tractor, whatever it is, that really, what I didn't know at the time really was preparing myself to be an entrepreneur and to be an engineer, because I learned so much you learn a lot about torque and power and force when you're trying to stand up a fence line all by yourself, or break a head bolt loose on a tractor all by yourself. That's where you really learn what it means. And when you go to college, maybe you'll know the formula at that point, but to understand what that feels like and how it works, that's been invaluable in my career. Also, I had a couple of good co-ops, whatever you guys would call them today. We called them co-ops back then, where I was working as an electrical technician, again, getting my hands dirty, working on hydraulics and pneumatics and electronics. So I was able to, again, touch a lot of different fields besides just my electrical engineering background or degree. So I think that really prepared me well for being an entrepreneur, because, as David mentioned, you've got to be prepared to do it all. You're not just going to sit in a cube and do the one thing you want to do today. You're going to have to do everything, especially in the beginning. And something else, just to kind of tack on to what David and Rebeccca were saying, is when you start your own company, you have to have a good plan. A business plan is imperative. Our first company, UEC, we had a very good business plan. We executed to that plan, but quickly thereafter, we had to really understand what the customer wanted and where we were going, because we ended up changing directions about 4 different times over the course of 20 years. We went into a business thinking we were going to do automotive, and we banged our head against that wall for a while and really realized, hey, we needed to tack to the left, do something different. And we basically had to navigate our way around until we found the sweet spot where we could be successful. We found that piece of the market where our company could be successful. And if you're not flexible to say, you know what I wanted to do wasn't exactly right, I need to do this instead, that opens the doors up and maybe it will let you be more successful in your business.
Absolutely. Having that connection with your customers and understanding your market would allow you to pivot whenever the opportunity comes up. So thank you, Phil. Rebeccca, I have a question for you. You decided to earn an MBA. How did that affect then? What effect did that investment have in your entrepreneurial pursuit?
When I was at Sikorsky as a product engineer I was doing cost modeling, and I was modeling with computer applications. I was modeling the cost and performance of building composite aerospace structures is what I was doing. I was quickly getting into finance, and I was getting into industrial applications and the whole business side. And then I started thinking that maybe I wasn't going to be a hardcore engineer, that maybe I wanted to get more into management, maybe marketing, both of which I ended up doing with the company that we owned. So it was very useful. But I made the decision then to start my MBA. When we moved to Charleston and I went on my own, I was in the middle of it. So I continued to, I paid for the rest myself. I finished it here in Charleston. And so initially, it was a strategy to work within the corporation, but then it ended up being a valuable tool as an entrepreneur. Just understanding the overall business, all the facets of the business, from quality to supply chain to the finances, and maybe not being an expert in everything, but knowing enough on the technology side as well as the business side to make it all come together and work cohesively.
And I'm going to jump on and just add to what Rebeccca was saying about the MBA. I didn't finish my MBA, but I took a lot of the courses in it. And I will say that I took all the finance courses and I took all the accounting. If I didn't have that as a background starting my own company, it would have been very difficult. So I would highly encourage anybody that you're going to start your own company, get an education in finance and accounting. You got to understand books. You got to understand the debits and credits and ins and outs and, general administrative and overhead. If you can't do that and run your own books, you're going to have a really hard time keeping your finger on the company and whether you're making money or losing money and where that money's going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Budgeting is a crucial part of starting a company or a startup. It's basically the backbone. And if you don't manage it well, it could be the reason it fails, even if you have a great technology. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Rebecca. I have a question for Thu. Where are you in that process of your current endeavor, and what is the next challenge or step?
Right now, it's in the testing process right now, and we're designing the website and photographer, videos, searching for more products.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. It's a very interesting process from the standpoint that we did not, in prior businesses, do anything online. And this business will be almost exclusively online. So the development of the website, we're using Shopify. These are things that Thu and I, quite frankly, don't know anything about. So we're relying on people to help us and give us a lot of assistance, which speaks to one of the things you have to be willing to do, and that's to ask for help.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So I will continue on with you, David, and ask you, how do you transition from being an entrepreneur to a serial entrepreneur?
Well, I think that it's a desire to continue to move forward. So a person that I suppose you could call a serial entrepreneur. I've never looked at myself that way, but I guess maybe that fits. The idea that you get to a point in a business where it's really time to move on, and you know that you've accomplished all you're going to be able to do. You need to turn it over to people that want to continue the business, but to the next question I think you're going to ask with regard to the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager is that large businesses need a heavy amount of management, and the entrepreneur often does not fit into that mold. So you as an entrepreneur have to be able to say, yeah, it's my turn to move on. And if you really like being an entrepreneur, then you find something else to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we see Phil doing the same thing right now. So great example.
I can tell you right now, it's very painful working for a large corporation. I'm good for about 6 months, which is where I am right now.
I can add that in the deals that we did to sell the businesses, I never had a contract to continue to be employed. That was part of the deal that I did with each of the buyers. And the purpose of that was that, quite frankly, I cannot work for anybody else. That's I guess a blessing and a curse.
That may be a standard model for all entrepreneurs, because I can't either.
Absolutely.
The only person I can work with successfully is my wife.
That's a good thing.
Absolutely. So thank you guys. And I have a question for you, Phil. How do you systematically identify a market opportunity to apply in your areas of technical expertise?
Well, that's now with the internet, it's a whole lot easier than it was 30, 40 years ago, for sure. Back then, you've read magazines and you had to just talk to people, where now you can, pick up your computer and do just an amazing amount of research in a short amount of time. So I'll kind of jump ahead to the company I just sold. So our latest company, Security Enhancement Systems. We had a business plan. We had a technology. So not to go too far down in the weeds, but to back up on what David was saying about being a serial entrepreneur, I would say entrepreneurs aren't serial, they're more parallel, because I had 2 or 3 other companies going while I was still in my first company. So you start seeing opportunities. So fast forward, the latest company that I just sold, we identified that opportunity about probably 10 years before, 15 years even, before we started that business. And it was really just, we knew what we had from a technology perspective. So it was just a matter of figuring out which market needed that technology. And we went through everything from oil and gas, construction. We looked at a lot of different industries, and we ended up settling on telecom, particularly cell, as a good starting point. And then from there, we did a lot of research into who was already in that market. And in our case, it was Master Lock and a couple other pretty major security lock providing type companies. So we looked at them. We did the typical SWOT analysis. You know, a lot of you hear that a lot in business schools. SWOT analysis. That's actually one tool that is useful, that you will use a lot. You may not call it a SWOT analysis, but that's what you're doing. So we did that, and then identified telecom as where we needed to go. Dialed in our product to specifically address them, and then figure out what their weak spots are. You know, what is that little belly button push that really gets them going, and then we attack that spot, and we're successful doing so.
I would like to add to what Phil just said. He brought up the term SWOT analysis. We found that to be extremely helpful in every business we did. Each strategic plan we put together was based on what would really be considered a very simple analytical tool, the SWOT tool. But I encourage anybody and everybody to understand that. It's extremely valuable, and it's just one of those things that I think goes underrated. But if you get a chance, it's simple to use. For us, it paid huge dividends.
Absolutely. Yes. SWOT analysis. It's a very important, crucial tool that we can use as entrepreneurs when running a company. And speaking of SWOT analysis, I have a question for Rebeccca. What are the advantages that you found in being a business student in a STEM university in terms of becoming an entrepreneur?
I think in any business, having an understanding of the core competency of the business. So going out and again, my role transitioned into the front end of the business, which was market opportunities and customers engagements and building the pipeline and dealing with the contracts, what we were going to do, what were the prospects we wanted to chase, and being able to understand it from a business perspective and what that meant in combination to the technology, being able to talk to the other engineers, being able to talk to the contracts folks, being able to talk to everybody involved and understand what was going on was, I think, completely imperative. And I think having the technical background, even though I chose to not make that the focus of my career, was instrumental, as well as it provided a huge credibility factor. So when they did start talking to me and they understood that I had a pretty solid background, the conversation quickly elevated to where it needed to be.
Absolutely. Being that bridge for that gap between the technical side and the running the business is very crucial, and having somebody on the team or you yourself doing that is gives a lot of credibility, as you mentioned. Which brings me to the next question for Thu. What are the skill sets to be a successful entrepreneur?
Skill sets. Work hard, give in all you got. Be resourceful, ask questions, find a good mentor, follow through, and just tenacity and go for it.
Absolutely. Yep. It comes down to going for it. And, you know, they say when you build a startup, you basically build the plane and then you put the wings as it's flying. It's kind of work in progress thing, which I have actually a question for David. Being involved in multiple successful exits, how do you know when it's time to exit? How do you know that you're done?
You know, that's actually a very interesting and deep question, because if you're an entrepreneur, as we said earlier, eventually you just don't want to work for somebody else. But you can see that the company can continue, but it can't continue if you set aside your ego. It can't continue under you. you have to provide a way for the employees, the marketplace, the suppliers, everybody to continue to benefit from the business, and you have to move on. So the second part of that, and you recognize that in yourself, it's a soul searching kind of thing. The second part of that is you also have to know the market for the business, meaning the sales market, not the products you sell, but the business becomes a product. And you have to figure out a way to understand that market. And those markets cycle like every other market. So sometimes there's a lot of money flowing in the marketplace to purchase companies, and then sometimes it dries up. It's like a desert. So if you're serious about being an entrepreneur and also developing an exit plan, which is something that I encourage anybody who's wants to be an entrepreneur also has to understand how to exit. Then you need to be able to understand that market. And that comes from talking to people that do that kind of business, be it investment bankers or private equity firms, people that you might meet, go to seminars. I went to a seminar put on by Northern Trust, which handled a lot of our personal finances at the time. And they brought in experts, and I was able from that to monitor the marketplace and see when it was ripe to sell. And then of course, the first two businesses we sold ourselves. And then the third business, we used an investment banker. I would recommend the investment banker approach.
Okay.
Our neighbor.
Yeah.
They are.
Our
They turned
neighbor.
out to be our neighbor.
So I'd like to, if I got a second, I want to add on to that. So my 2 cents worth, having done this a few times, is going back to what David was saying. Entrepreneurs, we like to work for ourselves. We don't want to work for others. I think once you get to a point with your company, so that, my first company, UEC, I was 26 years old when I started that company. So I'd only been in the work world for 4 years, maybe 6 years, whatever. And so that business, we built that business. But once that company got to the point where it was a mature going concern, to David's point, I started working for the company. I wasn't an entrepreneur anymore. It almost felt like I was an employee like everybody else. And that started rubbing me wrong. That's when I knew it was time to get out. The company had matured. It didn't need to have that entrepreneurial spirit anymore. It was time to go. And we sold that company, some 26 years later. And then that pretty much happened with the second company that I started about 7 years ago. And it happened much faster. I felt like I was an employee again. The entrepreneurial spirit was over. I was able to bring this company to maturity much faster than the first one because I'd already done it once. And then it was just time. And I think you kind of see when it's time to go, when you're no longer contributing to the growth of the business, and it's just, and your mind is out doing other companies. My mind was already out thinking of the next thing I could do, so it was time to leave. And I'll second David's point about using a banker or private equity or somebody to represent you. We did that both times, and that's a lot of help because it's a lot of work selling a business. I mean, it is. They probe into every possible thing, and it's grueling. It's 3 or 4 months of grueling work.
I want to add to that, Phil. In our case, it's as I look back, it took about 18 months from start to finish to be able to sell the businesses at a prime number that was acceptable to us, and that didn't vary regardless of what the business was. We sold a construction business, we sold and 2 manufacturing businesses that were located in different market spaces, and each one took that period of time. So it's a long process, and it is, as Phil said, very grueling. They check your underwear size.
Yep. I've talked to a few people, and that's exactly what they do. Is they go through everything, and I bet having help from an investment banker is tremendous. So talking about investment bankers or private equity, so what were some of the challenges you faced with raising capital, and how did you overcome them?
Sorry, who is that question targeted to?
It's an open floor, so
Oh.
whoever wants to take a stab at it.
So for Rebeccca and I, we're less than sophisticated. We did it the old-fashioned way. We did it ourselves. So we started with nothing, like 0.00 of nothing, and basically sweat equity, built the business. We took out a $50,000 loan to start the company, and I thought we were done. $50,000. Oh my God, I can't believe we've got that much debt. And pretty much just went from there. Having a good relationship with the bank is important. Making sure that the bank that you're dealing with is holding up their end of the bargain. You got to don't take what they're saying for granted. We went through 3 different banks over the course of 20 some years. You know, you got to have a good banker on your side because you've got to finance cash flow. That's a college level course in itself, understanding cash flow, that a lot of people don't get that. I won't get into that now, but if you're going to start your own business, depending of course on the type of business, like a manufacturing business, cash is king. You've got a lot of money floating out there, and you can't do it alone. You've got to have a bank with a line of credit to be able to do that. So you know, that I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure you've got a good bank behind you. Anyway.
Absolutely. Have a good relationship with banker. Does anybody else want to add to that, or?
I will. The situation with us, somewhat similar. Borrowed $100,000 and had nothing. You know, just on my good looks and charm. That so I could only get 100 grand. I
guess you must look better than me. I only got 50.
Yeah, I didn't want to make that comparison, Phil, but you know, but the process, I'll echo, you need a good relationship with the bank. But one of the things we did is we continued to not take profits out of the business. We pay taxes, of course, you can't get away without doing that. But we kept the money in the business. And when the downturns came, which are inevitable, there's market cycles, we were able to survive where a lot of other companies were getting, I'll call them margin calls from the bank, saying you got to pay up your loan or we're going to change your interest rate or any of that. We never had any of that because we essentially accumulated enough money to operate the business without the help of a bank.
Amazing. That's great. So we heard how important it is to have the right team members when growing a business. In what ways did your management team change through your company's growth and through those cycles and difficulties? And that's an open floor question as well.
Ways did it change? Well, you start out and you have a few key people doing everything. And I think that was even when I worked together, we used to bump into each other a lot because he's doing half, I'm doing half. And as you grow your team, people start to specialize in certain core competencies, which was really a relief. So we slowly grew to a management team about 4 or 5. By the time we sold, we had about 8 to 9 really good, independent thinking, competent management team that really got along well. And and that was so important, that they all worked together, that they trusted each other, that there was no rivalry or backstabbing, because when that gets introduced into the environment, it's so toxic. I mean, and you see it everywhere, right? But you have to control that. But our team evolves, and for probably every amazing hire, we had 3 bad hires. So there is trial and error. You do make mistakes, and My advice is if you know it's the wrong person or they get in there and they're not, as they said, who they said they were, what they said they do, you need to get rid of them right away. You need to make a change and start over, because going down the path with the wrong person it could be a very fatal mistake. We did learn that by
Oh, yeah, we learned that lesson.
Yes, we did.
We can add a little saying to that: too quick to hire, too late to fire. And in addition, one of the things that we are firm believers in is incentive. So in our world, profit is not a dirty word. And in fact, you have to strive to make a profit, and you have to maximize that. Today, that I don't think is necessarily as popular in a topic of discussion, but it is in fact true. And in all of our key management people, which were with us for years and years and years, and a lot of them were not college educated. They came out of the field, out of the factory, but had the skills, and we were able to identify those. But we had huge incentives that were a combination of productivity, profitability, quality, and safety, because those are huge elements in the businesses we were in. We did not want to have people working for us that did not respond to incentive. Now, it wasn't at the expense of employee relations or human resources or quality of the product, but there had to be an element in that individual that was, in fact, I guess what you'd call an entrepreneurial spirit. They wanted to make money, and we were willing to pay for that on a schedule that we put together that enhanced the value of the company, but put a lot of money in their pockets. And I can tell you, just to give you a perspective on that, we had division managers in our businesses that would walk out at the end of the year with a bonus of $1 million.
Wow. That's awesome.
And that was earned. That money was earned on a formula that meant that our business was extremely successful because they were making that kind of money.
That's awesome. Having incentive like that, it's definitely help the employees to keep up with the work and achieving, and help the growth of your company as well. So I want to go back to what you said first. So do you agree with the quote, hire fast and fire faster?
I would agree that, with Rebecca's point, when you identify that somebody's not a fit, you need to get rid of them quickly. If anything that we did wrong over the years is we did not fire fast enough. And at the end of the day, I always felt bad. Like, oh, I'm hurting this person. I don't want to put them on the street, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you're doing them a favor too, because it's just not going to work. So just get it over with. Pull out that Band-Aid as fast as possible.
Absolutely. What about you, Dave?
We completely echo that. The experience is sometimes tough to learn. The lesson. When you're first starting out, you have a great deal of understanding of the people around you and the compassion. But the fact is that an employee that doesn't fit in the long run can end up costing you a lot of money. And you can ameliorate all of that by working out a severance package that is fair to them and fair to the company, but you have to recognize that you need to move on. It's in the best interest of the company. And if you don't put the best interest of the company first, you will not succeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The growth of the company is the most important, because a lot of people who are working in that company or putting their hearts out also would like to see that company grow and, earn their money and incentives. So I'm going to open up the floor for the audience to send their questions on the chat. However, I have a question for you guys. KBC or the doghouse?
Ooh.
Or the doghouse.
Now, KBC didn't exist when we went to Michigan Tech.
Yeah.
So it was basically the downtowner. I played softball for the DT, so I was always partial to the DT because I was on their softball team.
Yeah, the doghouse just has so many memories. Actually, that's sort of where I met Phil at the carnival a long time ago.
Nice.
So is
Oh,
he in
Winter
the
Carnival is
doghouse a
next
lot?
week.
Sorry.
So is he in the doghouse a lot?
Yeah, he stayed in the doghouse a lot, but no, we sort of met before, but that's where we met Winter Carnival in '86. Yeah, so I love the doghouse, but the new brewery, there's so many new places now. It's always fun to come back.
Well, I have to say that I spent more than my share of time in Tony's Sports Bar watching Saturday night hockey in Canada.
Oh, wow.
I don't think Tony's Sports Bar exists anymore.
Nope.
When
I
I
was gonna
they
ask
had-
you, where's it at?
When I left, they had to close the doors.
He done enough damage.
All right, so one more question before we start taking the students' question or the audience. What is one Kiowa Peninsula destination that every MTU student should visit?
I think I know what you're probably going to say, so I'll say it for you. So
We agree on that.
yeah, so one of the things that we did later in life, we brought our children when they were little up to Michigan Tech, is we went to the Quincy mine and went down into the mine and toured that, and that was pretty cool. And I think that would be something that all tech students should do, just to check it out. I think it really gives you a feel for the history of the copper country by going down in that mine. You really it helps you get a little bit of a taste of what it would have been like to be a copper miner, you know, with your pasty down there at the bottom of the mine, eating your lunch in the pitch black down in some deep hole. So I would recommend doing that.
Absolutely, the Quincy mine tour. Actually, I just did it back in August when I had friends coming up to visit me, and it definitely gave me that kind of connection with the land that we're on right now. We're seeing the history and understanding what people went through just for us to get to where we're at right now. It gives us a sense of appreciation to the UP, especially Hohen and Hancock. So what about you, Dave?
I think there's two things, two places. One is the Brockway Mountain Drive that gets you up on top of the mountain, and you get this incredible view of the Keweenaw and the both sides with Lake Superior. The other thing is the Estevan Pines, which is a virgin white pine forest. And it speaks to the early beginnings of the Upper Peninsula. And without that preserve up there, I'm certain there would not be any virgin white pine anywhere in the UP, because it was completely cut over except for that area. So it's looking into the past of the UP, not unlike going into the mine, which is also very interesting. But it gives you another perspective on what it used to be.
Wow, I haven't checked that out, so I probably should before I graduate. But I agree with you on the Brockway Mountain Drive is absolutely beautiful. I make sure before first week of classes, I have to drive up there. I have to come in a few days early before classes so I can make that drive. Thank you guys for your insight. So we have a question from the audience here. How have you been able to make an impact in the world via your entrepreneurial success? And again, that's an open floor question, so anybody would take a stab at it.
Well, I'll jump on that for us here. As schmaltzy as it might sound, when you think about all of the people that our businesses have employed, all of the families that have been taken care of, and that not only goes to the employees, but it also goes to all the suppliers, you know, all of the customers, the distributors that we had. That, you know, there's numerous people as a part of that chain. I don't know the number, but I'm guessing it's in the billions that from an economic impact standpoint. So when I reflect on that, and Thu and I talk about that on occasion, where you look at the number of people that have been, and I would say positively affected by the opportunity to be employed in the companies that we owned, and they continue to this day. So one of the things we did when we sold the businesses is we made sure that they continued to survive, and there was always a little clause in the buy-sell agreement that said you can't fire anybody.
Wow, that's great. What about you, Philip or Rebecca?
I think we spend a lot of time contributing to STEM, supporting STEM organizations here. The first STEM organization that started, I don't even know, I lose track of time, 15 years ago, we were involved in as advisors to get that going, scholarships, our employees. So, any being involved in our community, went from the chamber side to different boards, a lot with the schools, especially now we're involved with more younger kids programs for younger kids to be exposed to STEM and opportunities, just to keep the conversation going and help smaller or younger children understand what options they have and what they should be striving for.
Absolutely. So, Rebecca, you were recognized as a champion of change by the Obama administration. How do you live that title on a daily basis?
Well, that was basically a recognition for a product that we developed at UEC Electronics. And it was the renewable energy power system that was deployed, and it had an impact, of course, on the environment as well as saving soldiers' lives. And it was a really powerful tool during that time. It has gone on. So the whole idea was introducing change and change that benefits. In this case, it was the Marine Corps and the servicemen. But change as its own entity, as its own self, is there, and we're seeing more of that now than ever. Whether it's through everything that's happening in the economy and the environment, and it's change, and it's being able to see these opportunities during times and to adapt and be able to change course and respond and to do whatever you need to do to make that change have a positive outcome.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna conclude here. So we just got another question here. What key activities would you recommend to young entrepreneurs to invest their time in? It's a good question.
What was the question again?
What key activities would you recommend to young entrepreneurs to invest their time in?
Oh, well, so circle back to my prior comment. I think getting some education in marketing, finance, and accounting for sure. That's more of a foundational thing. If you know you're going to be an entrepreneur and starting your own company, I would definitely do that foundationally. I think, this is something that Rebecca was very good at. Start networking, getting into different societies, groups, clubs, whatever it might be, so that you become more aware of the community and what's going on around you. And then I think lastly, if you can find one, find a good mentor.
Absolutely. What about you, Dave?
Well, the mentorship thing is extremely important. That I would second, third, and fourth on that one. Also, I'm going to drop a title of a book that I don't think is published anymore. And it sounds horrible, the title, but it's called Winning Through Intimidation. And it starts off with the idea that you can sit behind a big desk, you're intimidating, so on and so forth. But what it really teaches you as an individual is how not to be intimidated. And as a young entrepreneur, there's going to be many times when you're going to walk into somebody's office and they will intimidate the daylights out of you. And you have to learn enough about yourself to be strong and recognize that a lot of what takes place in those kinds of meetings is intended to intimidate you, to test you. And you have to be willing to stand that and able to stand that test. And that'll happen with bankers. It'll happen with investment people. It'll happen with any suppliers, competitors, just goes on. And you gotta develop that toughness.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have to conclude here. We're coming up to time. So thank you guys for sharing your knowledge and experiences with our students and our audience. I'm gonna hand it off to Dean. So thank you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thu. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Phil. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with our students, talk with our campus. You're wonderful role models for all of our young people. I know we did a lot of focusing on success today, but it was good to also hear stories of challenges and pivoting and working through letting employees go and all the different challenges that go into this. You're very inspirational, I think, as well, in that to continue to be entrepreneurs and continue to move on to the next idea and the next idea. I think a lot of people would be happy with one success story, and it's so encouraging for us to hear and see you all continue on. And so we very much thank you for your time and efforts. Michigan Tech has been very much focusing on exactly the stories of combining innovation with entrepreneurship here at Michigan Tech. And a lot of those words, Thu, I really enjoyed the words you were describe when you were asked to describe one word. A lot of those characteristics that you all came up with are the themes here at Michigan Tech. So that was very inspirational as well. So thank you very much for everybody that attended this. I want to thank Lisa Casper and Ollie and John Leinen for putting this together behind the scenes and doing all the heavy lifting. And we look forward to interacting with you guys again at another future Husky Innovate event. So bye-bye. Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.